Hello, this is your host Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast. This is episode 15 of the Grindset stream, episode 15 of Escaping the Moldbug Matrix. I'm again joined by Logos. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Telegram, and you can support me on Locals, buy me a coffee, and subscribe star. Okay, so last episode, somebody mentioned with regards to my comment about connecting Curtis Yarvin with Dante, and that whole long article that he had where Dante was a traitor siding with the Holy Roman Empire against the Pope, yada yada. But that's him. And someone said, Record Deepness, I think was the commenter, said I should check out his Gray Mirror Coriolanus. So we're going to take a brief break. Well, not brief, it's Moldbug, but a break from Unqualified Reservations to check up on this Coriolanus angle and see if what I said last week sort of is consistent with what he's telling us here now. So, Coriolanus and the Conservatives, for I will fight against my cankered country with the spleen of all the underfiends. March 2nd, 2021. Last week, the polymathic Scott Alexander turned his eye from the chemistry of antidepressants to the strategy of the Republican Party. Buckaroo Banzai was an instant star at every field he tried his hand at, but Scott easily matches his piece. Okay, this is a tweet. Carl Rowe, very interesting. Modest proposal for Republicans use the word class. Pivot from mindless populist rage to a thoughtful campaign to fight classism. Somewhere Lord John Warfin is spitting mad. Laugh while you can, monkey boy. There is no doubt that Scott Alexander is a major figure of our time. And like anyone to whom so many things come easily, he must sometimes wonder, is this really how good I am? Or is it just that everything sucks? Half and half, maybe. Coriolanus, the Coriolanus Conservative. I would not say Coriolanus is Shakespeare's best play, but it has been marked down for its politics, which are Shakespeare's. Found in all of his plays, but nowhere less diluted. Shakespeare is more right-wing than Tolkien. Shakespeare makes Tolkien sound like Deepak Chopra. Don't forget that in The Tempest, Shakespeare basically invents racism. Without Caliban, how could Tolkien have dreamed up his orcs and goblins? As an anti-democratic narrative, Coriolanus is up there with Aristophanes' finest. It is easy to translate the politics of Coriolanus into now. Volscians are Republicans, plebeians are the protected classes, the tribunes are leftists, the nobles are centrists. Tullius Aufidius is Karl Rove. No, but we'll keep going. Scott, a Roman aristocrat of the bluest blood, as mighty with the pen as Gaius Marcius with the sword, gets stabbed in the ass by the woke tribunes, as the whole other nobles stand around and hold their kicked out of the decent society by the times and not happy about it. Scott is like, Aufidius, my old enemy Aufidius. Turns out you were 100% right about Rome. Let's win this together, baby. Here's how you can play it. Coriolanus belongs in the ranks of Shakespeare's greatest tragedies because it satisfies the fundamental criteria of tension in a tragedy, inevitability. Through the protagonist must come to a bad end, the audience can never quite say what he could or should have done differently. Surely we cannot say what Coriolanus should have done differently. Should he have flattered the mob, never gone to the Volscians, not accepted his mother's peace deal, or any of these things, and he would not have been Coriolanus. Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know, I'm going to try to give a very brief TLDR. Coriolanus was a play by Shakespeare based off the historic figure in the life of Plutarch, who was one of Rome's heroes fighting the Volscians. But due to his irascibility and his inability to deal with the issues of Republican government and taking off his soldier hat when he was in the forum, his enemies politically were able to organize the people against him. He leaves the city in order to take revenge. He sides with the Volscians, marches on Rome, and then his mother, his wife, and then his son in the play confront him and say, over our dead bodies, he'll take Rome. And then Coriolanus backs down because he can't, because he's a man of aristocratic principles, killing your own family members for vengeance is something that he can't do, even though he might kill fellow Romans. That's the TLDR for the whole play, and let's see what Moldbug has to say about the rest of this. A Coriolanus conservative is anyone with an upper-class background who, despairing at the utter bankruptcy of his class and the regime it staffs, defects to the barbarians. There are, of course, many such cases. The culture of the civilized man does not change. He does not drop his subscription to Mumbai and start getting into monster truck rallies. He remains nauseated by the smell of garlic, even the women reek of it. He remains a Roman and a Whole Foods supporter. Coriolanus is even a Roman patriot. What he learns in the first 3 acts is that Rome is broken and only a blacksmith can pound it back into shape. That blacksmith is God, but even the righteous vengeance of God needs a big hammer. The only available hammer is the Republicans. The truth is that Coriolanus is not really a Republican any more than Scott Alexander is a Volscian. He does not pray to the Volscian gods or even like Volscian food. The areas of intersection that make this alliance possible is purely negative. Both sides were equally revolted by the human cancer that is Rome. Spoiler, it doesn't work out. Okay, well, with this bloated intro, Logos, I think 2 things haven't changed with Moldbug. His rhetorical devices are still tortured and awful to read. And he's really the same. Has he changed at all? This is like 2021.
Not really, but I wouldn't expect him to.
I guess not. Is there anything you want to add on this intro here?
Well, I wanted to expand on the part that you said no to, where he's calling the people in the play different things, like these are leftists, these are Republicans. These
Oh,
are
right. Karl Rove is just a washed-up hack who started the war in Iraq. He's hardly Coriolanus. See, what makes a tragedy is that the character who falls is otherwise a decent guy, right?
He says Tullius Aufidius is Karl Rove. Who is that?
Oh, well, he's not that either. Aufidius was the captain of the Volscians. So he was like the Volscian counterpart to Coriolanus.
Aha, okay.
He was their military successor. So, and then of course the big reveal is Coriolanus switches sides and he's like, hey, mortal enemy, let's team up and smash Rome together. That's the big turnaround in the play. But no, I mean, again, these are 2 aristocratic characters in an ancient setting with martial skills, but more to the point, they have a certain code of honor. They're lawful characters. That's it. To use a D&D analogy, they're lawful characters.
Right.
Karl Rove is not a lawful character.
Yeah.
Is he? I mean, would you when you think of Karl Rove, Logos, do you think of a lawful character?
Yeah, I guess. I think he's just trying to do like a structural interpretation where the players are stand-ins for factions, not necessarily the players themselves being like alignments. So it doesn't matter whether the person's lawful evil or neutral good or whatever. What matters is here's the barbarian class of our time, here's the Roman class of our time, who's heading them. So I guess that the narrative he's trying to spin is so Karl Rove is supposed to be the leader of the barbarians. Well, who are the barbarians?
Republicans. All right, because Karl Rove is a Republican.
Well, but he's distinguishing between like the noble class of Republicans and the basically the riffraff.
Yeah.
So what's odd to me is that he's having Karl Rove lead the riffraff, the barbarians, the people on the outs. But I'm like, I mean, is he though? Do the Trumpist Republicans in 2021 know or care about Karl Rove? Know who he is? Do they consider him a leader? That's what's head scratching to me about it is how Karl Rove relates to the barbarian class of the Republican Party. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Moldbug, right? So
yeah.
Let's see. All right, okay, I looked at that. Here we go. The next part is reinforcing the Steelman. On its face, Scott's idea of using Marxist ideas on behalf of the middle class against the upper class, which happens to be exactly the same basic idea as NS, by the way, seems technically compelling for 3 reasons. First, it draws other Coriolanus types from the upper class, most or all of whom are already Marxists, and all of whom know how to think in Marxist logic. Second, Marxist logic is emotionally appealing to the middle classes because the social aspiration of the middle class is to be called cool as the upper class. Third, it is focusing on the real enemy. Okay, first of all, Logos, total BS. Like, Marxists hate the petite bourgeoisie. The petite bourgeoisie is just as impediment to socialism as the bourgeoisie is.
Yeah, by Marxist here, I think he's just talking about like a champagne socialist or, you know, like some suburban wine mom that thinks socialism and Bernie Sanders is awesome or something, but not like a dyed-in-the-wool Marxist. A dyed-in-the-wool Marxist hates the fact that the upper class exists. They don't want to be them. They hate that people want to be them. They're the people who would, like me, talk about things like conspicuous consumption and how wasteful it is, how wasteful capitalism is, and things like that. So he's got that wrong.
Well, but even the middle class itself, right? socialists, even like liberal winos, don't like the middle class. Like, the sort of small business owner, right? They don't like the small business owner.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah, he's saying the middle class want to be the upper class, and that's why they cling to Marxism, because they think that'll get them there.
But they don't. The middle
yeah,
class doesn't.
exactly.
Like, what middle class are you talking about, bro? Scott intends
Yeah.
this design as a replacement for the GOP's old Southern strategy, in which the Volscians considered their main enemy the plebeians, as well as they were entitled to, since the plebeians were the cannon fodder the Roman nobles hurled against them. But Scott is like, why not recruit the plebeians to fight in the Volscian legions? Don't both groups feel the same way about Rome's patrician elites? When the middle class attacks the lower classes, it is attacking the puppet and not the ventriloquist. That's a fail. Not only is it necessary to have a go at the ventriloquist, maybe the puppet can help. Maybe he's even getting tired of having a finger up his backside. When the middle class. So is he saying that's what Scott Alexander's saying, or is that what he's saying himself?
I think he's saying that's what Scott's saying. He's trying to explain why Scott is the Coriolanus in the current situation.
Well, I mean, he's right. The middle class going after the lower class doesn't do anything.
It just makes them look like they're punching down.
Well, and it just turns them into patsies for the bourgeoisie.
Well, definitely, yeah.
Simplicity is our only common language. The only problem with all this thinking is too much thinking. The only way Coriolanus can connect emotionally with the Volscians is on the basis of a clear and simple truth, not spin. If he's not a Marxist, he should not be technically pretending to be a Marxist. It doesn't buy him what it looks like it buys him, and nor can he see what it costs him. Coriolanus makes a bad general of the Volscians, not because he's a bad general, but because he's not a Volscian and does not understand the Volscian situation. What he understands instead is the Roman caricature of the Volscians, which is just not true. Ultimately, he fails because he tries to operate for real within the world of illusion. Okay, we need to separate two things. The Shakespeare play that Moldbug is torturing to death, and then whatever the point he's trying to make about Scott Alexander. No, the reason why Coriolanus is a bad general is not because he doesn't understand the Volscians. He understands them quite well. He beats them in battle, and he's able to convince their chief leader to join forces with them. It's because he's primarily motivated by vengeance against the city of Rome. And that's going to lead to a conflict with his prior filial piety, right? He's a lawful character. He stakes his lineage and reputation on his filial piety. So what does he do when that comes in conflict with his revenge on Rome? Now that's what the play says. Now I think now we need to separate that from what Moldbug is trying to say about Scott Alexander. And I guess he said Karl Rove. Sorry,
no, it's Scott Alexander. Scott Alexander's Coriolanus
is a bad Marxist because he's not really a Marxist. Well, this is an FYI, guys. This goes back a long way. Scott Alexander wrote a blog called something like Star Codex or something, and he was doing to Moldbug what I'm doing to him now, but it wasn't a vlog. It was actually a series of blog entries. So Moldbug doesn't really like this guy. But yeah, so I don't know. How do you want to handle that first paragraph there, or first two?
Here. Yeah. It seems like what he's trying to say is that Scott Alexander was working with the bourgeois upper classes, pretending to speak their Marxist shibboleths and all that good stuff. Recently, he's defected to be the one of the leaders for the opposition that he was speaking against. So basically, Moldbug, in not so many words, seems to be that Scott Alexander is switching sides and trying to pretend to be Moldbug 2.0 or something. And he's trying to say that Scott Alexander can't do it as well as him because he doesn't really understand the faction he's supposedly now trying to champion. Now, separate the Shakespeare stuff because I think I trust your interpretation of Shakespeare over anybody's because you read that guy to death. But that's the argument he's trying to make. Scott Alexander's not going to do as well as he thinks he is because he just doesn't understand the audience he's now trying to cater to, perhaps opportunistically, as Moldbug would say. Moldbug seems to be hinting in the later paragraphs that he knows his days are numbered because he can't do the Marxist dance as well as the other elites can.
Right.
I mean, Moldbug is saying in 3 paragraphs what we had a meme for even circa 2021. He's just calling Scott Alexander a grifter. That's basically what's going on. He's just like, the guy's a grifter, and here's like 5 paragraphs floweringly explaining what that means.
Because why not? Because why
Because
not?
why not? Yeah.
Of course, class is a social phenomenon, not an economic phenomenon. Whoa. What do you want to say about that, Logos?
It depends. I mean, it can be a social phenomena. What matters is whether there are economic barriers to entry to get into the class and get out of the class. So if there's some kind of a safety net that'll stop people being born in a certain class from ever going too low, because they can always extract more wealth from peasants or whatever else, they can always bail themselves out somehow to stay in the class. And if there's some economic barrier to entry, like a catch-22, like in order to get in this class, you have to have a certain amount of wealth, but maybe there's some law or social convention that says in order to accrue this kind of wealth, you have to have access to XYZ mechanism. But oh, look, only the people in this class have the mechanism to accrue this wealth. Then de facto, classes are economic based on how there are economic barriers to getting into and out of those classes. Now, if those went away, and let's say you just had like an aristocracy of talent or something, like say mathematicians in the Renaissance, right? Mathematicians would challenge each other to duels, and the winners would get to work for nobles and make lots of money, and the losers went into obscurity, more or less. So there are different classes of mathematicians based on the status in these high stakes duels and things like that. There, the class would be based purely on the social conventions and not the economics. So you have to look at the system to see what's what.
Okay. Of course, the fundamental three-class political structure of American society, in which the upper class and lower classes vote for the Democrats, while the middle class vote for the Republicans, has been in place for the lives of those now living. Nixon could have explained it just as clearly as Scott Alexander. Nixon would have said F more. Nixon might have even brought up the unnamables, but his motto was basically the same. Not one at all wants to use this clear and simple taxonomy. No one wants to be either upper or lower. The upper classes always prefer to call itself the middle class. The working class may be the lower class or the middle class, depending on the context. It gets particularly hard to parse where the lower class becomes lumpen rentier class. In terms of Trump's voting base, it's exactly the same as Mustache Man's, the lower middle class or petite bourgeoisie, literate but without sophisticated learning. To describe this as the working class in Marxist language is simply deliberate obfuscation, since the petite bourgeoisie is always the natural opponent of any Marxist client class. What we see Scott doing is what we see most Coriolanus types doing, over-egging the pudding. What the real Volscians really need is a frank Volscian simplicity, not devious Roman advertising. Refreshing clarity, not seductive spin. If you're a Roman and you want to talk to the Volscians, just tell them what you think. Okay, so again, he's a grifter. That's all there is to say right now, so we're moving on. Right, Logos?
Yeah, I agree.
Don't even use the jargon, even to invert it. It really looks like you're taking advantage of the enemy when you borrow his jargon. It feels like you're pulling off something slick. It felt that way to Mustache Man, too. Man, I tell you what, Logos, he's still on this guy after, 16 years?
I want to make a quick comment about this because there's some drama going on Twitter right now about this, right? Burgess and some other leftists are taking shots at Yarvin, and Dave the Distributus is not happy about it, so he's been having a go with them on Twitter over the last couple of days. And what Dave's been saying about their critiques is just something like, these guys don't address the substance of Moldbug. All they do is say, look, he said something unflattering about Haiti. Look how much of a racist he is, or something like that. But reading through this, look at how many times Moldbug is invoking Godwin's law, of all things, to make whatever point he's trying to make at the time. It's like he's just using Mustache Man as this giant stick to beat the reader with, to say, see how bad things can be, agree with me, dang you. Like that. Like for
You know what that sounds like? It sounds like what Ben Burgess would do.
Exactly, that's the point. So it seems odd to defend Yarvin on these grounds when we only picked this because somebody brought it up because of some other state of current affairs.
No, we're reading this because I brought up the traitor angle with Dante
right.
and Beatrice.
Right. So
somebody said read the Coriolanus article.
Exactly. So we didn't pull up this article because we were looking for Yarvin using this rhetorical device. We pulled it up for something else suggested by a reader, and we saw this in all sorts of articles we were reading back, earlier too. He does this a lot. He still does this in 2021. So I don't know. I just think this is an instance of methinks thou doth protest too much. I don't know the old English. I'd
Yeah,
probably
there
get
we
that
go.
completely
There we
wrong,
go.
but
That's good. That's good.
yeah.
In the real Germany of the 20s and 30s, not the fevered imagination of certain pundits a century later, no one confused right with left. No serious observer ever thought the NS was a party on the left. Inflation has an uncanny valley. Leftism is a test for self, a social immune system. If you look like you're pretending to be a member of a group, but you're clearly not, you're something much more dangerous than a stranger, you're a spy. Well, it seems as if sending leftist signals should calm the leftist immune system. It actually excites the immune system because it is detecting hostile, deceptive activity which may be attempting to parasitize the hive, which is exactly what you are doing. And while it is true that the middle class has an unconscious emotional attraction to the signals of the upper class, these signals remain toxic. First, using leftist signals molds rightist thinking to conform with, not escape, the thinking of its leftist masters. Second, this jargon comes from the master's house, thinking it unconsciously humiliating and therefore weakening. Third, even when true ideas are humiliating, when expressed in the master's jargon, the false ones are far more damaging. Your whole soul is crushed by the assimilating a lie. Well, okay, we've said this before, Logos, but I feel like it's bears repeating again. He's already defined this as a kind of like Marxism. Now, remember, Logos, who actually runs the United States? Oh, right. It's the bourgeoisie. It's the Federal Reserve Bank.
It's neolibs.
Neolibs.
It's neolibs, not Marxists.
Exactly. And so, is anybody in government advocating the abolition of private property and state control of industry? I don't know anybody that's advocating that.
I mean, the right-wing narrative is that the WEF mantra of "you will own nothing and be happy" is some kind of nod to Marxism. However, that's gravely mistaken, because the Marxists do believe in the personal versus private property dichotomy. So for Marxists, you absolutely can own plenty of personal property. It's claiming to own things you do not work and use that's a problem. You cannot own something that other people work for you on a daily basis, is where they draw the line. But you can own a house, you can own a car. Marxists would be just as absolutely terrified of WEF like propaganda as anybody on the right would be. So this conflation often just misunderstands the whole critique of private property that Marxists use.
Well, let's remember, this is just Moldbug yet again covering for the real power behind the throne.
Right.
By not naming it. The other thing I'll add, just real quick before moving on, is this sort of standardization of everything. This sort of like what say, for example, the John Birch Society. I think I mentioned this in my Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution discussion. What they thought was the sort of standardization and consolidation of all economic power as Marxism and state power was fundamentally actually the result of the machine itself. I mentioned Thorsten Veblen's machine process. If everything is going to be this tightly controlled mechanism of the machine process, then any sort of autonomy has to be rubbed out.
Right.
So that's my take for this. When in doubt, do not submit. If it looks like you can win by submitting, it may be so. From a Bayesian standpoint, you should check your numbers like 17 times, and the same goes if you're tempted to fight. Both these temptations are epidemic, and 99 times out of 100, they are Satan's baits. Scott's idea of describing the political conflict as class struggle is good in as much as it is frank. Volscian presentation of present historical reality, it's bad in as much as it uses stale Marxist prejudices from the 20th century to muddle a clearly present reality and subtly signal submission. Use old words if you can, make new words if you must, but keep the tongue of mortar out of your mouth and then ideally your ears as well. Well, I think it's really interesting that it's actually Moldbug who's muddling a clear present reality and signaling submission. I mean, look, right, Moldbug? Look, bourgeoisie. I'm not even going to name you. I want to go back up and, get the nice cocktail parties of champagne, and I'm going to submit to whatever indignities you force me to.
Well, yeah, and the big picture of this is Scott Alexander wants to basically use the left-wing language of class war against the left, right? Because it's the left that are saying, like, George Carlin of all people is like, it's a class war and you're losing, basically was in his skits. And what Scott Alexander is saying is, okay, well, the right needs to own that rhetoric and just say, yeah, it is a class war. The left just hate the rich for being rich, and try to simplify it on those terms. That's basically what this whole spiel is about.
Yeah. Well, leave it to Logos to, in 1 minute, condense what Moldbug had to say in 30 paragraphs. Let's stipulate more true parts. Let's stipulate some more true parts of Scott's argument. First, he has the basic shape of the cultural coalition, right? Hardly a surprise in a psychiatrist who has the great advantage of being directly exposed to unmediated social reality. This post may not be the best SSC post, but by literary standards. Oh, hold on. Is any of these posts the best by literary standards, Logos?
I don't know. I don't know what SSC stands for.
SSC, I don't know. Probably some sort of standardized principle. But in a way, it may be the most significant. Yes, the American petite bourgeoisie is polyracial. This is a real collective identity, but not in any sense a white collective identity. While in most, but not all cases, it is mostly in European ancestry, its collective identity has orders of magnitude more to do with college football. I'm sorry if you have to be the one to tell you that the summertime of the Indiana clan is past. Well, hold on, Logos. This makes absolutely no sense, right? Because Scott Alexander is making reference to class language, not an implicit call to any sort of ethnic supremacy. So where is this even coming from?
Maybe there's something on Scott Alexander's blog that we're not reading that Moldbug's pointing to, but he's not citing any quotes that he's responding to, which makes it really difficult to entangle where this would be coming from.
Yeah, it does. And yes, the alliance between the lower and upper classes is fragile. There is often very little social connection between these groups, even in traditionally ethnocentric communities. Like his own Logos, there's always an upper segment of the lower class that is inclined to join the middle class, though its hereditary political role is an upper class client. Trump did indeed peel off many of these voters. Bolsonaro in Brazil is a super white dude with an uber white platform, yet his support has very much the structure of Scott describes as a fundamentally anti-elite political party. In fact, Bolsonaro proves that the right wing can still win elections in a country's demographics and Gini index are either like the one our masters are turning our country into. However, while we can sense a subconscious motive in presenting this strategy, the desire to make the GOP kosher, according to the new NPR Unitarian values that Scott and I grew up in. Yet when we look at the segment of the Democratic lower classes vote block that Trump peeled off, it is far more clear these wins came despite his reputation for racism. Especially, but not exclusively among Hispanic voters, they may well have come because of it. Anyone who knows America knows that no group in the country has more racist attitudes, although fascist might also be an appropriate pejorative. You don't really understand either slur until you've been a Mexican Trump voter. In Brazilian terms, we might call this the Tropa de Elite vote, hardly a PC coalition. Now, so again, I don't know where he's getting this from Scott Alexander, but what's very interesting here is, again, why did anybody on the right think Moldbug is on their side? He just threw them all under the bus again.
Yeah, listening to the way he's describing these people, it just seems like there's disdain dripping from every paragraph.
Well, that was back in 2007 too, remember? I was pointing it out.
Yeah. I mean, even in 2021 with Trump trying to retake the government and all this stuff, it's just like, just reading this, it's just like, look at these dumb people that Trump's peeling off, This is hardly the good, pure PC coalition that we want. Mm-hmm. It's a bunch of the Trump's describing them. It's just bizarre to me.
Like, well, we know Moldbug is a Brahmin in sheep's clothing, but I don't know why the right can't figure. I mean, he even told us in 2007 for crying out loud. Remember?
Yeah.
The false part. Tullius Aufidius likes Scott's post because he sees the same truths. So do basically all Republican strategists. The problem is our Aufidius is essentially a professional loser. So are basically all our Republican strategists. And politicians, even in a different way, Trump and the Trumpists. And basically they always have been. Well, hold on, Logos. When you win against Hillary, who was predicted to win 90% to your 10%, I call that a winner, don't you, Logos?
Right. And if you look at all the stuff it took to beat Trump for a second term, because this is 2021 after Trump lost a second election, right? If you look at everything they had to marshal against him and all the backlash that's come as a result of that, I mean, yeah, he lost, but is he a loser? If he forced them into a Pyrrhic victory because of the lengths they had to go through to beat him, then only time will tell. I don't know.
Yeah. Scott's coalition is good. His strategy is not good. His strategy is original. His coalition is not. Phidias' coalition is the same, but his strategy is neither original nor good. Scott is logos. That's why MAGA communism is teaming up with these right-wing talkers. You've got Hawes and Jackson Hinkle. They're talking to Alex Jones. They're talking to Jordan Peterson. I think that there is this on the ground realization by both the Marxists and the conservatives that hey, yeah, maybe we need to reframe the conversation here.
Yeah, definitely.
And Moldbug is really scared of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I mean, have you been following Haas and Jackson Hinkle on Twitter? Logos? They're talking about all these conservative-esque. I mean, heck, even Caleb Maupin defended the truckers in Canada.
Yeah, he did.
So yeah, no, it's actually a really good strategy. That's why Moldbug is crapping his pants. that's why the woke left is crapping his pants, because it's a good strategy. They know what this entails if it comes off.
Right.
Scott is, as always, sincere and means well, but because he thinks within the received framing of the problem, it's just offering the Volscians a more enticing way to lose. So the impact of his speech is the opposite of his intent in many such cases. Before we look at the details of this trap, let's pull the camera way back and look at how a thinker as acute as Scott could fall into it. Don't try to fix it. If there's one way I could change the way the rationalists think, it is to work harder at breaking received frames rather than trying to repair them. Dude, Logos, all Moldbug tries to do is repair the received frame of American capitalism. I don't get this.
Well, the other problem is if you just keep breaking received frames, what exactly are you left with, right? This goes back to let's make this currently useful. This goes back to the debate that AA and Sargon were having about, say, what the new right should do. You have to have a message that you give to people, and if all you're doing is breaking existing messages and frames, what you're going to do is isolate yourself into a more and more niche subculture that breaks all the framing, man. And you haven't actually come up with anything that can talk to people on their own terms.
Yep. They try to fix too much. This is because they overestimate their reasoning capacities, which makes them bite off more than they can chew and not chew it as thoroughly as they ought to. Man, if that wasn't self-descriptive, what was, Logos?
No kidding.
The rationalist program does not quite conceive itself as the project of rethinking all the 20th century's received wisdom and the instructions that transmit it. It does seem to increasingly be realizing this, but it has not yet assimilated all the implications which go far beyond the pay grade of any blog's comment section. For example, when you see yourself through the eye of the world and discover that the eye of the world sees something very different and much more uglier than what you see in the mirror, you can react in three ways. You can doubt your mirror or your own eyes. You can conclude that the eyes of the world has it in for you, or you can doubt the eye of the world, which forces you to doubt everything you know about the world. Because how do you learn all these things? Through that eye of the world. I'm not sure what he means by the eye of the world here, Logos.
I think this actually goes back to that article we read a while ago, way back in 2007. Remember the AI he was alluding to? That could get all the information and broadcast reports about Earth to the aliens or something like that.
That was Beatrice.
That was Beatrice. I think it's alluding to Beatrice, but I think in the 14 years he's starting to think of big tech, the internet, and all the people watching what we do online as the eye. That's my guess.
Oh, the Eye of Sauron. He's already made Tolkien references. What do you want to bet? He's going to call this the Eye of Sauron.
Oh, that's it. I mean, is Beatrice the Eye of Sauron? I mean, now it seems like in 14 years he's starting to get his metaphors or analogies muddled. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, though. Or you can doubt the eye of the world, which forces you to doubt everything you know about the world. Yeah, you know who did that, Logos? Papa Descartes. And look what he did with it.
Uh-huh.
You know, I don't think... I think this is what scares Moldbug. He doesn't want you to doubt the eye of the world. Well, he's a tech bro, right? He helped build the eye. The eye is truth, right?
Well, I don't know. Does he not want you to doubt it? Because what he says in the first paragraph is you have to continually break framing rather than try to repair it. So the conclusion of that would be doubt all the knowledge the eye gave you, basically. But
Well,
so this could just be a case where he has a bunch of contradictory meanings because he's trying to sow chaos again. I don't know.
oh, there's the Eye of Sauron. It's coming up. It is in some ways symptomatic of the indolence of the technology age that previous movements to revise all human knowledge generally started from. Socratic stance of ignorance. The rational strategy is more parsimonious. They prefer correction. Usually, we throw all the intellectual garbage in the trash. We do not try to wash it off. Many things discarded still have some virtue. We discard them anyway, both because we are confident in our ability to obtain or produce new ones, and because we suspect that the problems with the discarded object are more than something superficial soiling. We are not confident in our power to repair them, not as confident as we are in our power to replace them. This is why we place so much store in knowing what we don't know. What is different about the rationalists is that their confidence in their own reasoning powers is so high that they feel they can ignore this pruning optimization. If there are any problems in the received wisdom in the institutions that transmit it, they will find and fix them one by one. This strategy left them surprised when the eye of the world, which turned out to be more or less the eye of Sauron, Sarah called it, fell on them. From this Bayesian shock, we can extrapolate how well the strategy works for everything else. Okay. Well, first of all, this Cartesian methodology, Logos, is exactly what you and I have been doing our entire time online and probably even earlier. So it works. A, it works. B, the Eye of Sauron probably fell on them because Scott Alexander slipped up along the line.
Could be. I also don't like his framing about Socrates. Moldbug seems to want to have his cake and eat it, but maybe he's changed some in 14 years because he goes on diatribe about Plato, but Plato wrote through the character of Socrates. So, like, what is Moldbug thinking as Socrates here, and what is he thinking is that evil rationalist Plato stuff that leads to all these really bad ideologies and whatnot? I mean, Socrates is the vehicle for Plato here, so
Yep.
That's weird. This idea that Socrates approaches everything from pure ignorance and never corrects is also asinine. Just read any dialogue. He'll agree with the interlocutor on a whole bunch of basics about what things mean. They very quickly, for example, get to knowledge has justified true belief, but then they'll say, well, now we have to make some corrections on justifications because justifications are weird. And it turns out they're still weird because you have Gettier cases and things like that. Socrates and the interlocutor in one of the ones that we read about justice said that, you know, the trichotomy of like legalism, the mob, or like the powerful, I believe was the third one. I have to read that one, is a good trichotomy for justice that people are hotly debating. Okay, so they're not coming from pure ignorance. Here's the framing. Do all of them have problems, and where would we fix them? And they just investigate all of them and find they have problems, but they're still trying to correct people's framing about justice and starting with something agreed upon. There is no pure ignorance here. It's making me annoyed because he's describing Socrates as some sort of like Matt Dillahunty figure or something.
He's not.
And he's not. Absolutely not. He will absolutely start with a base level of terms, a base level of conventional wisdom about a topic, and then from there poke and prod to see what's good and what's bad about it, and let's ask a bunch of questions to see if something needs to change. So
if I am Scott Alexander and every time I think about a field from scratch, I at least place among the experts and often just beat them, whether the field is serotonin, chemistry, Republican strategy, rock and roll, or rocket cars, I have to wonder if the field can be fixed at all. I have to wonder if anything can be fixed at all. The alternative is to consider the possibility that I'm just plain perfect, which I know to be untrue, finding that besides a hard mathematical core, everything we know is corrupt and has been taught to us by corrupt institutions. For money is not the only kind of corruption. The instinct of the Socratic mind is to understand the mechanisms of putrefaction, use this understanding to identify any areas of clearly and completely healthy tissue, exercise the rest, and toss it in the biohazard bin. Yes, this is some good amongst the rest. Ideas are not people, so it's okay to let God sort them out. What was I going to say here? I forgot. The maximalist approach to epistemologic surgery leaves us with huge amounts of mental flesh to reconstruct. On the other hand, we have large numbers of bored intellectuals. The hardest problem is that these intellectuals are terrible at organizing themselves. Yeah, no, the point that I remember, Logos, was this whole about smashing frames and everything. He's still a Stirnerite, right? The way that you maximize violence is by making sure that you don't have any shared or agreed upon frame to discuss your issues.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's just him being a Sternerite.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this section here, Logos?
He's downplaying the drawbacks to his own strategy. He's giving you all the pluses. He's downplaying the drawbacks. I mean, one of the big drawbacks to just like ripping at all the ideas that seem to have a little bit of infection is systems have to be rebuilt ultimately. And if look, it's really, really easy to infect ideas. Insanely easy to infect ideas. And so if you're going to rip everything up from scratch and try to redo everything once ideas get a bit of infection in them, then that's always going to keep you on the back foot for your enemy, because all they have to do is just send in just enough spies or just enough whatever to muddy the waters on ideas and reinfect things or whatever. Just use Alinskyite tactics and just like start flipping everything. And they force you to rebuild your whole institutions from scratch, which takes a decade every time. Then you'll always be in a state of rebuilding, and you'll never be in a state of being able to do anything. And that's one of the big drawbacks he's not actually dealing with for his tactic here.
Yeah. Republican strategy from a position of ignorance. Under the model of ignorance, it seems insufficient to rethink the answers of the 20th century. We have to rethink both the 20th century questions and its assumptions, not to say the 19th century always had it right, or the 20th century always got it wrong. Like a good scholar, Scott starts by stating the problem he is solving. Your old platform of capitalism and liberty and whatever no longer excites people. Trump managed to excite people, but you don't know how to turn his personal appeal into a new platform. All else being equal, I'd rather you have a coherent, interesting message. The assumption here is that the Republicans are in need of a new platform, or even any platform at all. Can we break that frame? All Republicans need is for people to A, vote for Republicans, B, give money to Republicans, C, in certain very rare cases, demonstrate for Republicans. A platform or message so cute set of ideas about what the government ought to do is one way to coordinate these outcomes. Is it the only way or the best way? Is AA academic agent? I mean, is Moldbug academic agent now? You know, Logos? You're muted. Okay. Still muted. If we do not know it is the right way, we may be closing doors before we look behind them. Perhaps Republican votes can be coordinated with a totally different story. What are Republicans trying to do when they vote? What is the purpose of their collective action? What is the expected result? What is the predicted result? All right, well, let's see. Logos is away for a moment, guys, so I'm going to engage with the chat. Lots of fun stuff. Cyber Ninja Zero, speaking as the diplomat's son, I will say that the global elites are generally some of the best people in the world. Curtis Yarvin, 2023. I mean, this basically just proves I was right. I mean, just put a fork in it, guys. Curtis Yarvin just unironically outed himself. Jeff Stricken, the series should keep going until Finargle is buried 666 fathoms deep in a SF hypodermic fecal disposal yard. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Where else were we here? What else we got in the chat? Okay, Todd and Logo, since you guys are looking for a modern Yarvin, you should read his response to the hit piece on him he wrote 2 days ago. We might. It's not so much that we're giving up on unqualified reservations. This was just a recommendation that somebody said could explain stuff. So we'll see if it does. I'm not convinced it will. So, let's see. Mass creation broadcast. What Schrodinger mode does Moldbug enter in this time? I'm not sure yet. Not sure yet. Oh boy. Chicago 666. Todd, do you know if Moldbug has any stated positions on the Ukraine conflict? I do not. I'm sure he does. I just haven't familiarized myself with him. Yeah, okay, back on the grind. Well, action, individual or collective, is rational when it is expected and predicted results are identical. When hope and reason coincide, a brief examination of collective action by Republican voters across the last 50 years indicates that the prior prediction of the tangible impact of any such populist revolution should be, besides some disruption of government, nothing, zero. Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing, right? Trump won in 2016. That shouldn't have happened. In fact, going back to 2007, when he was still saying that the Republicans were losers, which at the time they had won an election, shouldn't have happened, but it did. This has all the world the indication that Moldbug is afraid that something is afoot. Something is afoot that might upset the apple cart. A platform is a set of ideas about how to govern. The only reason to have a platform is to participate in a government if winning elections does not result in any meaningful participation in government. But Tullius and Aufidius and his Volscian officers winning elections isn't nothing at all to a Volscian officer, not the voting infantry who just want to sack Rome, but the consultant, pundit, and think tank class. Winning is life itself. But this life will end if the officers cease to be able to convince the infantry that nothing is something. The Volscians never do end up sacking Rome, do they? And needless to say, the Roman patricians and the Volscian patricians see eye to eye on this one. The ugly fact of the matter is that the post-war establishment republicanism was created by the grace of the Democrats and still exists by that same grace. As Julius Nyerere said, America is a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have two. Ergo, the centrists are happy to help Aufidius tell his story and even to win his elections, as long as he doesn't win too many. So, a couple points here. On the one hand, he's talking about here this fundamental alliance between the Democrats and the Republicans, and we sort of see that with the rhetoric that was popular in the aughts, and then from Obama to the Trump years, where there's just two. The Democrats and Republicans are two sides of the same coin, and to some extent, that was the case. But what Trump showed is that there was a real insurgency that could take place. Remember, in the Democratic National Convention of 2015 and 16, they actively shut down and sabotaged Bernie Sanders. Oh, you're back, Logos. Hey.
Yeah, sorry, I had company. Unexpected company. I had to deal with something. I'm back.
Yeah, sure. So, TLDR, Logos. I'll just do a TLDR for this whole Republican strategy from a position of ignorance. A platform or a message, some cute set of ideas about what the government ought to do is one of the best ways to coordinate outcomes. Is it the only way or is it the best way? If we don't know it is the right way, we may be closing doors before we even look at them. And I'm like, is Moldbug AA now? Oh, we don't need a platform. We don't need a message. We just need to win, Logos.
Well, exactly. I mean, you want people to vote for you, but people are voting for something. So, I mean, I don't fully agree with Sargon on their debate, but I mean, there's a kernel of truth to that position. You have to convince people of something. There's an of there in politics that has to be dealt with somewhere.
Right. The other TLDR was a brief examination of collective action by the Republican voters across the last 50 years indicates that the prior prediction of the tangible impact of any populist revolution should be, besides some disruption of government, nothing, zero. Oh, because 2016 was zero, Logos. I forgot about that.
Well, I mean, him winning in 2016, but Moldbug's point is once Trump got into power, he didn't really get anything substantial done because all the systems of power blocked him at every turn.
Right, which means that we're shifting into a revolutionary phase.
Yes.
That's all it means. I mean, pronouncing victory before the war even starts is a bad way to fight a war, Logos.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this gets back to the weird thing. It's like, what does Moldbug expect to be done? Because he doesn't want violence, supposedly. He thinks if you just formally note who's in charge, at least if he still holds his opinion in 2021, that'll solve violence. But formally acknowledging who's in charge isn't really going to do much. I mean, the people who were in charge of they made that Time article, how we fortified the election, basically. basically come out and said we were in charge. There's like the 200 people in the Pentagon who basically quit en masse and supported Biden, letting you know we're the power behind the military. We lied about sending the troops, bring the troops home when Trump asked us to do it. We're backing Biden. They did everything in their power to basically do what Moldbug wanted them to do in the first place. And it's so far it doesn't seem to have made violence any less inevitable, because shocker, Todd, people are normative. They once people have seen the people who are in charge start asserting their dominance, they don't go, oh well, it's really nice. They're telling us they're in charge now. I guess we better listen to them. They go, hey, yeah, wow, I didn't realize you guys were in charge, but you're a bunch of jerks and we want you gone.
Well, not only that, the powers that be chose a dementia patient to lead America into World War III.
Basically, he's just a figurehead for it. They're leading us into World War III, and he's just in front of the cameras.
Sure, but that's the point. Like, does that sound like something Moldbug would ideally advocate for in his 2007 iteration? No.
As long as everybody knows who's in charge, why not?
I guess that's true. And as long as Beatrice is giving him daily updates.
Exactly.
The Republican paradox. The problem from the perspective of a still reluctant Coriolanus, like Scott Alexander, and also from the perspective of Ophidius, is that the realer republicanism gets, the more unacceptable it becomes. Scott is more Volumnia than Coriolanus. The mob has wronged Volumnia too, but Volumnia does not want Rome sacked. Why should she? But what else aside from nothing could be the result of the Volscian invasion? We know exactly that the Volscian sack of Rome looks like what it looks like. Okay, Godwin's law. Again, Logos. Again. There is no question about that Rome needs to be whacked with a hammer. Okay, Godwin's law. Such statistics show that only 5% Godwin's law. We'll just skip that. Mussolini was once asked what his platform was. My platform, he calmly explained, is to govern Italy. I used that one before. We read that, remember?
Yep.
Imagine if a Republican in 2024, someone semi-based like Hawley or DeSantis came out with, Senator Hawley, what is your platform? What is your message? And the candidate casually replied, my platform is to govern America. My message is you must submit. And then he reads the last 10 paragraphs of FDR's first inaugural. Woo, lads, this is strong medicine. Well, I'm not precisely against this sort of thing, since strong medicine is strong enough to work, is also strong enough to kill. After all, Godwin's law. Moreover, contrary to MSNBC, there are approximately 0 Republicans who like to think of republicanism as a watered-down fascism. And it seems clearer and clearer that is exactly what it is. Whoa, Logos! This is like full woke-tard language. How is this guy a man of the right?
Well, exactly. And I mean, how can... Now I'm like so confused. I gotta try to untangle this. The left-wing people are calling Moldbug basically fascist light. Moldbug is basically saying that the Republican Party is fascist light. So the left is pointing at Moldbug. Moldbug is pointing at the Republicans. And Dave is basically saying, no, you don't properly understand Moldbug, because he's agreeing with you that all these dirty Republicans are fascist light. It basically seems to be what's going. This is a mess.
But Logos, this was a year and a half ago. Before.
I know.
Before.
Well, I know.
Okay. So what do you want? More water or more fascism? Bear in mind the water is hardly the purest water, but nor would the fascism impress El Duce. Don't you like that choice? You can be a Democrat. As a Democrat, you also have a range of options. Your options go all the way from the Red Guards to President Brezhnev. Typically, when you order one, you get the other, so why even worry about it? While in America in 2021 is not, of course, in a civil war, and has certainly slid several steps in that direction. It is not an exaggeration to describe our situation as a cold civil war, and the failure to catch fire may be due to the dampness of the logs. In any case, we are certainly well beyond platforms and issues. Washington in 2017 and 2018 was the perfect test of whether Republican politicians can seize power by demagoguing their way to... Again, notice the language here, Logos. This is like woke-tard language.
Yeah, it is.
Then assuming the public's trust by politicizing the government. The GOP technically controlled all 3 branches of the constitutional government, with the most populist president ever. Is Moldbug trying to join the closest chapter of Antifa?
It's not too far off.
I mean, the language fits. The GOP technically controlled. Okay, yeah, of course, they did absolutely nothing of any historical significance. Oh, I'm sorry, Logos. Donald Trump only appointed 2 justices and overthrew Roe v. Wade.
Exactly.
Nothing of historical significance. Now that was in 2022. He wrote this in 2021. So again, history, like karma, can be a bitch. So be careful.
Well, also, what's interesting is, I think the fact that we have a documented instance of the Pentagon lying to a sitting president about an order that was given to return troops from foreign places is massive. The entire point of the Pentagon is that it is to be ruled by civilian leadership. That's the point. That's the point of our executive branch. The civilian representative rules the military, not the other way around. The fact that Trump got them to fail to follow his orders and lie to him about doing so is massively historically significant, because that sets the first precedent, maybe not the first one, but surely one of the biggest ones, for that tipping balance of power. It's one of the most historically significant things, in my view, to happen to the country.
I mean, doesn't that just mean that the United States is if not a military dictatorship, at least some sort of dictatorship?
Yeah, basically. And Trump is the one that revealed that. That's one of those historically significant things that could have happened on his term. Aside from actually a hot civil war where millions kill each other or something, that's like one of the biggest bombshells ever that could have come out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, of course it did. Absolutely. It looks like the Trump nightmare has proved that our sacred democracy is safe from politics. What this means is that representative democracy is dead. If representative democracy is in a system in which voters elect politicians who take control of the government and use this power to do whatever they promised, the voters would do. What is it? Or is there some other more spiritual, transcendent kind of democracy? Maybe you should form a club with Kim Jong-un and his Democratic People's Republic. And if democracy is dead and republicanism cannot in any conceivable future govern, why offer Republicans a better platform? It's like trying to feed a corpse a cheeseburger. Just because he won't take a Big Mac doesn't mean you should try him on the Wagyu. In reality, the question is not what policies a Republican is for. We are far past that. The question is still legal to be a Republican, and if so, what kind of Republican? The question is whether the USG is as unaccountable as the USSR, whether, as Michael Anton writes, the regime is in power firmly. I, for one, do not believe it will or can be voted out of power, though it may lose power from its own internal conflicts, contradictions, and incompetence. And the question is Lenin's question, what is to be done? We'll get back to this shortly. But when Scott Alexander or even Tullius Alphidius derives his jingling ice cream truck full of prediction markets and family tax credits and all kinds of great policy ideas through the silent ruined city of American political discourse into some kind of ruthless cancellation RPG ambush, no happy screaming children run out from the basements of the shattered tower blocks to fork over a couple of denarii for an Inuit pie, and if they do, they probably shouldn't. I mean, this all could have been said so much between the bad political references and Godwin's law. There's not much to be said here, other than that he thinks the Republican Party's done. But again, I'll quote you, Logos. "Methink thou dost protest too much." Because why get so animated? Why get your knickers in a knot if it's already over?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that.
Okay. Benito Sereno, conservative. The situation is what a civilian stumbles into a war posing as a peace. Inevitably reminds me of Melville's great work, Benito Sereno. Here, Scott is the innocent Yankee Captain Delano helping his good Captain Sereno get his ship refitted. How do they teach Benito Sereno in high school these days? College even? Does the library keep it locked in a special room you need a pass for, like in the Soviet Union? Here is the question, dear reader. The opinions above, even Anton's, are not ideas you often hear professional conservatives express. Why is this? It is because they, A, have never heard or thought of these ideas, B, know this way of thinking but profoundly disagree with it, or C, can see where it's coming from, but no, Babbo is listening. Yes, senor, I have trust in Babbo. Here is a conservation with one of the Benito Sereno conservatives. Don Benito, as I shall call him, is a traditionalist well connected in what we might call the American Neo-Tory tradition, basically all Catholic, Orthodox, or High Church Anglicans with more PhDs than fit on the wall. Needless to say, these are all extremely fine people. Right, Logos? Just like the world controllers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Don was very concerned, not without reason, the world's biggest bookseller had just decided to silently censor a book by another neo-Tory. Amazon has started censoring books. Tyranny. Well, sure, and this definitely affects my publishing plans. On the other hand, I pointed out cheap, knee-jerk propaganda does not serve the cause. Censorship is not new. Censorship of books is not new. Leave the line to the father of the lies. He's better at it than you. One thing I need to explain for this to all make sense is Melville's Benito Sereno is a story about a Spanish slaving ship. Spain was one of the last nations in Europe to abolish slavery. And I read it once. The basic gist of it is an American captain gets on board, but then there's like a slave revolt that happens that I think he helps put down. And it's sort of like, it's actually kind of anti-woke because he's like, oh, look at these poor Negroes. They're all oppressed. When they rise up and start butchering everybody, he's horribly terrified. And so that's probably why Moldbug says this isn't going to get taught. So that's the sort of like TLDR for that book, because he's framing all of these discussions in light of a book or a play. And it does sort of help to know a little bit about it. Let's see. Yeah. On the other hand, yeah, of course, digital censorship is not new. So why should censorship of new books be new? Funny story, one of the best censorship regimes of the past, almost exactly 200 years ago, was Metternich's Carlsbad Decrees. The decrees were introduced to stamp out misinformation and hate speech in the German press, whose incitement of violence had led directly to the murder of the reactionary playwright August von Kotzebue, but by the student terrorist Karl Ludwig Sand. The decrees required registration of all printing equipment in Germany and imposed prior moderation of all publications of less than 25 pages. Metternich saw that all the great censors have always known the shortest texts are the most dangerous. This is why moderating Twitter is one thing, censoring Amazon is another. So this new step of deleting books is indeed a serious step, even a historic step. But is this step even new? It is not. As I reminded Don Benito, this is hardly the first time Amazon has refused to carry the works of a serious author. Amazon did not carry the works of Jared Taylor, for instance, or E. Michael Jones. I cannot think of a Taylor book which is really essential, but Jones's Slaughter of the Cities is certainly a masterpiece. It could be used as an editor. I understand Jones these days is putting most of his energy into the Jewish peril. I don't remember Slaughter even mentioning us nefarious tricksters of the desert. In any case, a book is a book. It's not its author, and I don't even have to agree with everything in a book to like it, do you? I'm actually pretty sure Jones does do that, but that's neither here nor there. Of course, what scares Don Benito is not the Revolutionary Committee has come for a book, but that it has come for a legitimate book from a legitimate publisher. Q. Rev. Niemöller. I was too tasteful to mention the Rev. Niemöller, but the Don and I had the following conversation, which I think sheds light on the real state of conservatism today. I have paraphrased his words to avoid even stylometric compromise of his identity. After making this point that Ryan Anderson's anti-transgender book was not the first to be censored, I said with my thumb, this is why the whole concept of wrongthink needs to be confronted as one. Ryan thinks he's wearing the full armor of God, but I'll bet he hasn't even thought about putting on the pants. But isn't that exactly what they want to trick us into defending? No, that's what they want you to trick you into disowning. By doing so, you are accepting their frame. The whole concept of dangerous ideas needs to go. You can't have a partial glasnost. None of these ideas are dangerous in 2021. None of them. You might as well ban the book that celebrated Hutzel Chipotle. One thing I don't understand for a long time was how much it damaged anti-communism to simply accept the tropes of the Brown Scare and invert them, trying to ban communists as though they were evil Godwin's law. But you'll lose if you paint Jared Taylor's logo on your shield. Life is too short to read him. But if you paint Freedom's logo on your sword, you'll win. At present, what's painted on your shield is freedom for me. This is an extremely unattractive message. Well, isn't that Moldbug's message logos? Freedom for me?
Well, kinda. Freedom for the corporations at minimum.
And he's a wage slave, which he's a well-paid wage slave. For instance, the first Red Scare inverts the tropes of the insane World War I anti-German agitation that fails. The second Red Scare inverted the tropes of FDR smearbund. It fails. This is why I feel that after these pragmatic approaches, it's actually time to put on the big boy pants and defend the actual principles regardless of whose books you do or don't want to read again with, etc. Conservatives have literally spent 100 years trying everything else. If God wants us to lose, we'll certainly lose. I don't think he wants us to lose on your knees, do you? The only principles relevant to us are the ones we actually believe in. You would never ban Taylor or Jones, and you know it. Instead, when you're like, why don't you ban Mein Kampf too? They just will. Which will be a huge gift, incidentally, to Godwin's Law. Not a big enough gift to make them actually matter. But then you'll have nothing to say at all. In a sense, the fundamental fallacy here is the belief that conservatism is a player, that it matters, that it's participating in democratic discourse or in the direction of the nation. I agree that the right has preferred to be beautiful losers. I want to win. It's even worse than this. Now, with Trump, we can't even be gentlemanly losers. We are such garbage. Conservatives have been beautiful losers who get ecstatic about completely fake wins. They thought they won when they elected Ike. Ike was the New Deal political general and a lifelong lib. He'd been mentioned in 48 for the Democrat nom. Wilkie in 40 was a Democrat until the year he ran. The year he ran. What kind of third world crap is this? See, most conservatives today would argue this country has become a one-party state, and they're not equal participants. But they're still not wearing the full armor of God because they believe the situation is new. Actually, they just noticed that it's older than they are and than most of their parents. So believing this lie, they react to the problem in a totally false and ineffectual way, which has zero effect even when they win their elections. This is super interesting. Links to Scott's essay. Why isn't the link there, Logos?
Probably there at the beginning.
Well, no, it says right here. Like there should be a link here.
Well, yeah, I think he linked at the beginning of his blog, but okay. That's all right.
It is, but it reflects many of the same systematic distortions. It's a model as to how the Republicans can participate effectively in our democracy. Not anything short of regime change is useless and even counterproductive, similar to the work of David Hines in this respect. Nothing short of regime change is useless and even counterproductive. Back to my point about violence, Logos.
Yeah, that's a pretty big turnaround from what we read in Unqualified Reservations. Before, he didn't talk about regime change. He just said, well, let's just make the people who are actually in charge CEOs, basically, and let them do what they want. Violence is bad.
Looks like the well-paid serf isn't as well paid anymore, and he's very upset.
Sounds like it.
Similar to the work of David Hines in this respect, another writer who advises cons to use the tools of libs to organize it politically around their interests. Of course, the lib organizations are all astroturf communist fronts, basically. Actually, as any democracy dies, there are three periods. One, when participation still works. One, when participation no longer works, but elections can still be weaponized as a tool of regime change. One, when elections don't work at all and are a total joke. And one, wherein elections are canceled because even the joke is old. I think that cognitively conservatives have realized that they are in the second phase. But in many ways, their visceral thinking remains that of the first. Every single mainstream conservative writer is terrified of being called and thrown under the bus with Taylor, Derbyshire, and Saylor. Everyone. The full armor of God, you're not even... Wow. I am totally conscious of how this process works. Your description of the three stages kind of reminds me of Sam Francis. Don Benito... Well, see, this is weird. This is supposed to be... What was it? Ryan Anderson. Okay. No, it's... Scott Alexander. Scott Alexander back in the day was more of a progressive.
No. This isn't Scott Alexander. This is a friend he was talking to, and he's keeping him anonymous.
Oh, okay. Don Benito also emitted a tearful laughing emoji at the last line and thumbs up on the two before it. Everyone. Also, of course, it's actually the whole armor of God. I always make that mistake for some reason. When you read that article in that legitimate conservative rag, it is by Benito Sereno. There's only one writer of the National Review, Benito Sereno. Captain Delano, in his innocence, has come aboard a ship whose captain is not its captain. Captain Delano's real peer is not Benito Serrano, it is Babbo. You might say he's the captain now. As for Captain Serrano, he definitely does not feel in charge. Okay, yeah, that's a reference to Bane from Batman. How did this happen anyway? How did America get a loyal opposition that is so loyal when the regime says jump, it actually asks how high? How in the world is it that the left can cancel a right-wing writer but not vice versa? How in the heck does a Democrat win the Republican nomination twice? America is a one-party state, and with typical American extravagance, they have two. The irony of the conservative intellectual is that one thing, it is his duty to tell the public the one thing he cannot tell the public. Okay, so where we're at here, this is what I'm starting to see piece together, and you can tell me if you agree, Logos. Well, Moldbug is still a Brahmin, but Moldbug can see that a lot of his peers have drank the Kool-Aid on all of this, post 1945 egalitarianism stuff, and is actually jeopardizing their sweet little gig. And he's like, well, hold on. Some of these, crazy far-right guys might have some ideas, but don't go too far. And, you stupid conservative rubes, if you just listen to me, hence the Elves versus Hobbits, which we haven't read yet, we could somehow salvage it for the Brahmins. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Which, who exactly is Moldbug's audience for this message?
Disaffected Brahmins.
Well, how many of those are there?
Enough.
I guess. The other thing, too, is how does this happen? It's simple. It's simple, Logos, right? I said this about the conservatives a lot lately. Never let winning get in the way of profits. That's
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. Moldbug doesn't even disagree with the fundamental message of conservatism. He just thinks it's not going to win them elections anymore. So, if it was still useful for them to win something, he would still be singing capitalism's praises all since 2007, right? The easy response you give to your friend that complains about Amazon canceling a book is, yeah, that's what private corporations do, stupid. Give them more money and liberty. That's all you just say. That's the conversation. Right there. It ends. Corporations are not your friend. Period. The end.
The end. Let's recap. First of all, I agree with Scott. Prediction markets are good. Experts sometimes get it wrong. Sometimes, Logos, they get it wrong all the time, in my estimation, after the last 15 years.
Basically.
Give me a break. Sometimes the Republicans are the polyracial party of the social middle class. These things are true. We should say them loudly. Yet, what is our real political landscape? You can be a Republican, the Republican Party, including its deranged fringes, all the way to the alt-right. Oh, there we go. Mic drop, Logos. Mic drop.
I missed that. Say that again.
The Republican Party, including its deranged fringes, all the way to the alt-right.
There you go.
What have I been saying this whole time, Logos?
Yeah.
Certainly a complete spectrum from pure fraud to pure Godwin's law. Corruption, betrayal, and Wow. So the entire alt-right are just frauds in Godwin's law. That's wow.
The Republican Party is frauds to Godwin's law. And this is actually really, really relevant because of the schism of what's going on now in the Republican National Committee, right? They voted for their chairperson, and they voted to keep the same chairperson that got the Republicans' butts kicked in the 2020 midterm elections. The recent midterms, the 2022 ones. Yeah. And Charlie Kirk and a bunch of people are, winding up a storm on Twitter about it. But I'm just chuckling at the whole thing because, I mean, what would Charlie Kirk of all people want to change about the status quo? Really?
Well, I know. No, but think about all the egg on the face of all these reactionary trads defending Moldbug. You're just a hoax.
No, Todd. You haven't been charitable enough to understand the real true point that Moldbug is trying to make in all this.
Wah, wah. Oh wow. I think this line here alone was worth reading the whole essay. Right here.
Yep.
Corruption, betrayal, and perversion are observed across the spectrum. Ultimately, the Republican Party is a party of losers, and to support it is to be a loser. Well, not the Trump Party, but when you give it ideas that are either fake ideas for helping its officials defraud its voters or real ideas for Wow, there you go. Godwin's Law again. I mean, Logos, how is he not signing up for the next chapter of Antifa? What is Ben Burgess's beef with this
guy? He said some unflattering things about Haiti back in 2007.
Wow. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go real meta here on Moldbug. Yes, the Republicans are a party of losers. Doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of an insanity. So why the frick are you trying to pretend to be a progressive when you said stuff 15 years ago that's going to get you canceled? When does that ever work, Logos?
Right.
Oh, no, I'm the real progressive. Trust me, guys. I'm the real Brahmin. Well, what's this? All this racist stuff? 2007, 8, 9, and 10? Ooh, Moldbug. This is bad. This is real bad. I mean, I guess it takes one to know one, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You can be a Democrat. The Democratic Party, including its deranged fringes, all the way to Antifa, contain a complete spectrum from pure bureaucracy to pure sadism. Corruption, psychophancy, and perversion are observed across the spectrum. Ultimately, the Democratic Party is a criminal organization, and its supporter is to be a criminal. And since it's the ruling party, unless you oppose it, you support it. And third parties are even worse. And people ask me why I don't like democracy. But let's get back to that nagging question of Lenin's, what is to be done? Coriolanus' dream in mind. Clearly, an optimal outcome for Coriolanus would be if he could somehow end up as both King of the Volscians and Consul of Rome. Oh, okay, Moldbug, if you say so. The actual Romans would have taken this very poorly, so I imagine with the Volscians. Still, why can't there be peace? Why can't we all just get along? Such was Volumnia's dream. It remains a good one. Wait, Logos. I thought we didn't want peace. I thought we just wanted to smash all the, revolution now.
Well, yeah, violence is bad, but regime change is the only answer. And of course, they're just going to let us do that without violence. But we could maybe sell it to them if we use a frame. But using the frame is just conceding to the enemy. We have to smash all the frames. Something about chimps will resolve this whole thing, Todd. There's a young chimp around here somewhere. There's an old chimp around here somewhere, and they're going to fight non-violently, and the result will determine the outcome.
You know what else never works, Logos? You know what else never works? Being an inferior member of the political power structure, begging and groveling to those higher up the structure to get a promotion.
Yeah, basically. It sounds like that's what he's doing so much.
It doesn't
I'm not
work.
one of these terrible racist alt-right guys, people. I'm one of the smart ones on the Conservative Party. Let me advise you to be the CEOs of our new neo-cameralist utopia, please.
Speaking of what never works, that never works.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, when I'll use an example. When Charles Martel overthrew the Merovingians, you think he asked for their permission?
No.
No, this is stupid. You don't go to the power structure saying, "Hey, I want to overthrow you. Can you please let me do that?" It'd be actually better for you if I overthrew you. Like, what kind of a fever dream delusion is that?
Right, exactly.
Ultimately, like Scott Alexander, I am a Roman. I like Roman food. I have a Roman accent. I actually live among the Volscians now, and I find much to admire in them. I am not one of them. Not even my children will be of them. I have no desire to see them sack Rome. Why would I want to see that? Why, no reason, except that, as Coriolanus put it, I will fight against my cankered country with the spleen of all the under fiends. And as a surgeon, he takes it so far that we almost think his enemy is his country and not the cancer. In the end, he does fail, and we never learn what he should have done instead. Or at least we can never agree. But let me state 3 axioms which I think are self-evident. First, Italy contains both Rome and Volscians. Rome constitutes both patricians and plebeians. All these people have to learn how to share the peninsula peacefully. Unless we have regime change, right? We have that, right? Rome is broken. If there is any source of external energy that can hammer Rome back together, it belongs to the Volscians. The Volscians cannot participate in Rome. Their politics are now binary. They either do nothing or overthrow Rome. Second, the Volscians can overthrow Rome. They can sack Rome. They cannot rule Rome. Letting the middle classes rule over the upper class is what Godwin's Law is, and Godwin's Law just doesn't work as much as we might want it to work. Logos, this is like he's actually using Marxist theory here, right? And this is where I'm going to go way out and say it's wrong, right? The Godwin's Law armies were recruited from conscripts who were disillusioned after World War I. They were not the petite bourgeoisie. Were the black shirts petite bourgeoisie? No, they were conscripted soldiers from all over Italy. So it's, he seems to be saying that fascism is capitalism in decay, and that's the one area where I think the Marxists go wildly off in describing the situation.
Also, this is really dumb because he said that we cannot restrict class to economic terms earlier in the essay.
Oops.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, here's an example where letting the ruling class, the middle class, rule the upper class, worked well. The Mercantile Revolution in Britain.
Yeah.
Nothing fascist about that. I mean, it was a disaster in terms of the machine process, but on his terms, he'd have to agree it worked well.
On his terms, it worked very well.
Exactly, because there was no fascist uprising. There's no Godwin's Law to invoke, right? The middle mercantile classes basically got to buy loads of property from the nobles and basically sack their estates. The House of Lords lost a lot of power to the House of Commons. Like a whole bunch of stuff happened then, and you didn't have concentration camps. For crying out loud. This is the dumbest thing I've ever read.
Well, at this point, okay, in 2007, Moldbug was just kind of annoying. Now Moldbug is kind of annoying and hysterical.
Yes.
He's like a shrieking geek.
Yeah, basically. He's like the embodiment of that angry Wojak meme, the guy with like the giant like neck beard with the glasses and just like glaring at you and pointing at you. It's what I see every time I read something from him in this article. It's just so angry and derisive all the time.
At everybody. But you know who the one common factor in all this is, Logos? It's Moldbug.
Yeah.
I wonder when that finger's going to come right back around.
What has, apparently.
Let's see. And fascism just doesn't work as much as we might want it to work. No country ever prospered by decimating its own aristocracy, though many have tried the experiment. And we don't even have a middle-class petite bourgeoisie that can. The rude herdsmen of Antioch may have had the virtue and energy to sack Rome. The couch potatoes of Arkansas clearly lack the virtue and energy to sack Washington. And those who could not even sack will certainly never be able to rule. So wait, he bought into the whole Kool-Aid about Jan 6. This is bad.
This is bad. But also, again, the tale of the UK in its politics is basically the tale of kings losing authority to a class of nobility because they needed them to fund the wars. The class of nobility eventually losing out to a House of Commons and a mercantile class because the nobility ended up becoming indebted to the merchants and so on. So, I mean, the entire tale of the UK politics is upper classes losing to lower classes below them. And we didn't see anything like any of this fascist stuff pop up in the UK. This guy is absolutely insane. There's nothing redeeming from any of what I just read here.
Well, all I can say is, Logos, I'm very happy to hear that you have such a well-grounded understanding of history for a non-historian.
I took British history early and modern in college. It's like one of the only advanced history classes I ever got to take. Awesome. I learned something. Something.
Good. It's good.
Yeah.
For these axioms, we derive 3 obvious theorems. Oh, 3 obvious theorems. Buckle up, Logos. You ready for 3 obvious theorems?
Yeah, let's do it.
First, if the Volscians overthrow Rome, the goal of the regime change is not to launch a Volscian regime, which will favor Volscians over Romans, but to launch an Italian regime, which will treat all the groups and peoples of Italy with rigorous impartiality and uniform affection, while forgetting the entire past before the day of its own birth, thus ceremonially annihilating any and all historical grudges. Didn't we read an article from 2007 where he said that?
I don't know.
Sounds like we did, but I don't remember the name of the article. If the Volscians' goal is to secure good government for themselves, they can succeed. But if their goal is to put themselves in power, they must fail. And they cannot succeed by participating in the Roman regime, only by replacing it with some other regime that can be expected to govern them well and stably. Second, the next regime cannot reuse the organization, personnel, or procedures of the old regime. Otherwise, there is no regime change at all. But if most of the old staff are not mostly happy that the change happened, their severance payments are inadequate since the next regime owes them but does not want them, it is forced to buy them out. There is even a cute acronym for any future Coriolanus, RAGE, which stands for Retire All Government Employees. The only exception is units, like much of the military and other security forces, which still operate by command rather than by process. Third, because Volscians Thirdly, because Volscians, despite in their country's virtues, have no table manners and barely know which end of the pen to hold, most of the staff of the next regime will still be Roman patricians. They must be the genuine servants of the regime, not its silent masters. Any new regime must be manageable from the top down, not the bottom up. Okay. These are the three obvious conclusions.
None of those seem very obvious to me. I don't have much to say about them.
Yeah, I know. Me neither. One reason that regime change in America will be surprisingly easy is that America remains full of people who know how to stand up for very large, effective organizations very fast, mainly by deploying an army of very talented generals. However, most of these people are delivering ads, making toys, or devising complicated mathematical ways to steal from each other. I exaggerate slightly. And yes, most of them are libs. Culturally, so am I. There we go again, right? And from what I know of my readers, so probably are you. We are all Coriolanus. Yes, most of them are libs. And 3 seconds after the end of this ridiculous system, it won't matter at all. Come with me if you like this plan, even if you don't. All right, so that's the punchline. The guy last week said that he is the traitor. He is Dante. And I guess, well, in this case, it's Rome versus the Volscians, but what it should have been is the Holy Roman Empire versus the Pope. He's overthrowing the Pope by fighting with the Holy Roman Empire, but whatever. I mean, I don't know. What do you make of this muddled mess?
Well, at the end, one thing that I was chuckling about while my mic was muted was, and yes, most of them are libs. Culturally, so am I. Oh, it's no big deal if the people who used to be your enemies are now running to rule you. But remember what he said about Ike?
Yeah. I'll look that up.
Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to what he said about Ike. Good old Ike.
It'll take a little bit, but we'll get there. There we go. They thought they won when they elected Ike. Ike was a New Deal political general and a lifelong lib. He's been mentioned in 48 for the Democratic nom. Wilkie in 40 was a Democrat until the year he ran.
Wow. It's a bad thing the new guy's going to run the government used to be a lib. Now let's look right at what he said right at the end of the essay. Huh. It looks like Moldbug still hasn't lost his ability to be completely and utterly inconsistent on his biggest points.
I don't know what to say, Logos. I do know what to say. So I think about half an hour ago I gave a summary of what I thought this was all about, and it still seems to be true. Moldbug is in the Brahmin class. He said so. He says that's what he is. He sees that the system is going up in smoke because they drank the Kool-Aid on, flower power and peace and love in the 60s. And he's like, well, things are getting pretty hairy out there, guys. You might want to look at some crime stats. You might want to do some of this over here. And if only you stupid, Republican rubes would just line up behind me, I could be your Caesar figure and keep the game going for my lib friends. This isn't, who is he pitching this to again? I'll say it again. Who is the audience for this?
I think we can put it all together now pretty well. The audience for this is 90s, late 80s, early 90s liberal, Brahmin, technocratic people that just want to go back to a time where the government will leave everybody alone and we'll all sing Kumbaya, and it's going to be awesome. And they'll be your new leaders. They're going to be the generalists. They're smart people like him. They can rule everything. And they used to be 90s liberals, but that's okay. Not when Ike was, but it's okay that they were. And we need a regime change to get all these based 90s liberal technocrats in power.
So he's Sargon.
Yes, unironically. Except he disagrees with Sargon on the messaging front. Sargon wants to have a message. He says that messaging is pointless. You have to smash all the frames. That's where him and Sargon would disagree. But yes, in every other regard, he's basically Sargon.
Well, since he wanted to bring up so much Marxism, here's the deal, Logos, right? The material conditions of the 1990s are gone, never to come back. So it's ipso facto a fool's errand to try to go back to the 1990s.
Well, exactly, but it never stopped him before. I mean, the conditions of the 1960s, where corporations were decent to their workers in many regards, because they needed all hands on deck to take advantage of our being basically a monopoly on industry after World War II. Those days are gone, but it doesn't stop him from shilling for corporations as if they're still here. So
No, yeah. Some fun stuff from the chat. Nudge Unit Cathedral relies too much on emergent behavior. I recommend Academic Agent's updated version of the Octopus. Okay, so he's saying, because I had said a while ago, is this just Academic Agent? Okay.
Well, they're having an argument in the chat. So somebody was saying, what's wrong with the old cathedral idea? And this guy said the cathedral relies too much on emergent behavior, which I agree, right? Basically, remember when we were doing, I think it was Aaron Ra, no, what's his name? Aaron McIntyre.
Aaron McIntyre.
We were doing his video on the cathedral, and McIntyre said Moldbug's idea as if academia is the brain, which is kind of these professors just like coming up with these ideas out of the ether in this brain situation, and then producing content for the rest of the cathedral to enforce, basically, which is silly, right? That's the emergent behavior I think that's being talked about, is for no reason at all, these professors just coming up with these wacky ideas in academia, and then me and you were like, no, they're funded by the CIA. Particular academics are funded and raised in positions of power by the CIA to push certain narratives. Like, this is historical at this point.
Well, they're also funded by, wait for it, Logos, corporations.
Exactly.
Okay, remember, Flash, what do they call it? Flash quiz, pop quiz, everyone. Who funded Alfred Kinsey?
I know him. I can't think of his name.
The Rockefellers.
Thank you. I knew it was the oil guy. I'm like, the oil guy from back then. I'm having a brain fart. I
mean, seriously, how did this whole narrative, this whole, I don't know, American Cold War capitalist right narrative has to die. It's a complete insane contradiction. That's why I covered Sutton. Now, granted, Sutton comes from that position. That's the culture he comes out of. But he delivers the hydrogen bomb on the whole myth by his Soviet work.
Right.
So, take what you can get, right?
Yeah, I want to look more into the AA's octopus thing at some time, because that sounds really interesting. I think the idea is you've got all these legs. There are different aspects of the cathedral that's Moldbug's mentioning. But I think the idea is that there's a brain that's coordinating this to all of it. Nothing is emergent. You don't have a bunch of kooky professors just happening to come up with these crazy ideas in academia. Like
the idea that it's emergent's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Why would you think that?
Because you're a Brahmin and you think Brahmins are fundamentally good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we do have enough time for this, Logos.
Sure.
A brief terminology adjustment. I was about to say nothing with Moldbug is brief, but you can see it is brief. August 29, 2007. Rationalists are now automatists. Please update your equipment accordingly. I like the word automatist because it reinforces the connection between the idea that reason can be reduced or transcended. Wow. Oh, we'll just skip that quagmire. We covered it last week. And the discipline of constructing artificial reasoning devices, also known as AI. I don't think it's too hard to see how the desire to build AI could generate a bias in favor of formulaic epistemologies. One book on AI I can recommend is H.P. Newquist's The Brain Makers. Newquist's book came out in 1994, and he was writing about the 1980s generation of AI, which focused its efforts on symbolic logic, very different from the new Bayesian revival. The collapse of 80s AI, sometimes known as the AI winter, after a decade-long avalanche of pure sickening hype, should have taught us a permanent lesson. Sadly, humans are not good at permanent lessons. Well, Logos, as we just saw from the last article we read, neither is Moldbug. My own involvement with the 80s AI was quite tangible. My first job ever at age 15 involved translating an expert system engine from Basic to C and on the Wang VS. since I didn't know C at the time, and since I was using the first C compiler ever released for the VS, there was a great deal of merriment, but I also wondered who the hell would use this product and for what. The answer was no one, of course. Though, since my employer specialized in government work, this may not even have mattered. But much later, I had a coworker who was a veteran of IntelliCorp, Andy, and you out there, Andy. And after borrowing Newquist's book, he confirmed its general accuracy. I trust him. He trusts Newquist, and you trust me. Well, I don't, Logos, and I know you don't. So, since you can get the brain makers for only a quarter plus shipping and handling, it gives you a rat's ass about all the AI you should order it. Of course, the concepts are industry dirt, not actual technical information. But as Boltzmann proved, information is fragile, whereas dirt lasts forever. Why read today's dreamers when you can read about yesterday's failures? It's the difference between grape juice and wine. So how does this help with our terminology, Logos?
No idea.
Another love letter to himself. Now, this is definitely long, and I'm not ready for this. So we'll okay. Okay, so here's the deal, Logos. Now, we've already broken our overall arc by reading something from the Gray Mirror. I don't want to change fundamentally our strategy because we still haven't even read the original Cathedral article. But is it worth going to the essay that made everybody so hopping mad? Elves versus Hobbits. Should we do that next week?
I say let the audience decide.
Ooh, yeah, guys. If you want us to cover Elves versus Hobbits next week, let us know. Otherwise, we'll continue picking up with Unqualified Reservations. Minoan, I worry for Todd's forehead tonight. He's facepalmed it a lot because of Moldbug's inconsistency. Well, the thing is, okay, so let's try to tie all these threads together. We've read Moldbug, what he wrote a year and a half ago. And really, I didn't go into this. You and I didn't go into this completely ignorant of Moldbug. We knew people who said that they followed Moldbug. And so what the big thing that we've learned through all of this is people like Dave and Orrin McIntyre were ridiculously overly charitable to this guy. And if you were to get an idea of who Moldbug was from them, I don't think you get the true idea of who Moldbug is.
That's a good way to put it.
That's one. Number two, Moldbug is a butthurt tech programmer who is mad he got overlooked. Well, he's mad at two things. The old FDR New Deal managed democracy crowd of Walter Lippmann was still more or less in charge in 2007. So he was upset that, as the young chimp, he didn't get his tech promotions. But now that tech is God, he's still in the same spot he was in 2007. And he's really, really mad. Not only is he still in the same spot, the entire American system is falling apart at the seams. And the little gig that he had that he wanted, not only does he risk not getting promoted higher up, he risks falling all the way to the bottom. And he doesn't like that either.
Plausible.
On top of all that, he's a traitor to his own caste. Twice now, right? We have the Dante connection, and now we have a Coriolanus connection. So I guess he's telling us he's crossing a Rubicon of some kind, a digital pixel Rubicon, I guess. With Beatrice.
It's not clear exactly how he's crossing it meaningfully, because he still uses all their same shiblets. So we better be careful about that guy's mustache man. Mustache man.
Godwin's Law alert. Godwin's Law alert. Oh, no. But remember. And then the backdrop to all of this, Logos, we got Ben Burgess and the progressives going after Moldbug for being racist. And then, like you said, Dave defending him, Moldbug. I mean, it's you literally, Logos, you cannot make this up. I could not have made this up even if I wanted to parody Moldbug.
Yeah, basically. I mean, like, I don't understand what Rubicon he thinks he's crossing. Neocameralism, brass tacks, is just going to give the people he's complaining about even more power, basically, by formally, making them in charge. So that's not a betrayal of them of any kind. He just wants to formally, give them, more formal responsibilities commensurate with their power. That's about it. So it's not like he's stabbing in the back. He seems to fundamentally accept all their crucial narratives about how, how we get to fascism and how bad fascism is, and we can't let the rubes have too much political power. So he seems to have the distaste for the lower classes still baked into him from them in ways that are completely wrong. See our discussion about Great Britain's political arc, basically. Like, what Rubicon does he think he's crossing? In what way is he painting himself as this traitor? What does he think he's going to do to change the system in a way that will fundamentally screw these guys over? I can't think of it, but he seems to think he's doing it.
Basically, I think what Moldbug is trying to do is to have the computer programmer version of Jan 6.
Wow, that's gonna be boring.
So you have Moldbug go inside with the Senate or the Congress building and take his shirt off like the guy with the moose horns or the buffalo horns. No.
I think Moldbug will just send them a strongly worded letter, and that will basically be his January 6th.
You see, look, Logos, look, it's real simple. Just let me in and take over for you guys because I can just give you more. He's a consultant, Logos. That's it.
Yeah.
If you pay me, I will give you more power by restructuring this all in your favor. No, right. You see, this is why Moldbug is an idiot. The people in power don't want to be known. That's the whole point. Because if you know who's in power, you can shoot them. How can you be such an idiot, Logos? Why do you think dictators and all of these people weave this web? Because they don't want you to know who's in power, because then they become a target.
Well, basically, but look, Moldbug's trying to stop violence. He's trying to save the system.
Even when he's advocating for regime change.
Yeah, I don't know how you're getting regime change without violence. I mean, we talked about that. I don't want to beat that horse to death, but how are you getting regime change without violence?
Well, to be fair, this was when the sort of non-violent rioting was still kind of effective. Slobodan Milosevic, and I think around the year 2000, was overthrown in one of those color revolutions, more or less non-violently. But that's a very that situation is not at all analogous to the one that Moldbug is describing.
Yeah, basically. I mean, nothing's gonna happen non-violently. They already have their narrative. They have the arc for the country, and they're not gonna let a bunch of angry people stop them. So,
well, they're not gonna let them stop them non-violently, at least.
Yeah, basically.
So what is Moldbug gonna do when you have like an insurgency led by Alex Jones and Haas?
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder what Moldbug's reaction to that would be. Like, if there is an actual Nazgul vortex or something, and like there really is like a handshake and a weak nod between, like, the Alex Jones people, the lower class people that just fundamentally distrust the system completely, and the left wing people that want to shake it up, and they're like, okay, left wing people, we'll help you shake it up, but there will be some terms about what happens on the other side of it. If they agree to a deal and like that happens and things start escalating, I mean, what is Moldbug gonna say?
Well, I mean, it's happening already. Jackson Hinkle just announced on Twitter he's going to go on the Alex Jones show next week.
I want to watch that.
So awesome. Well, he's on the Jimmy Dore show. There's like this Jimmy Jackson Jones like triangle here. This is big stuff here, Logos.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
This is big stuff. But well, I guess you know what that means, Logos? It means that actual communists are fascists. That's what it means.
Well, I mean, democracy is fascist too. And any attempt to moderate higher class politics to lower classes is also fascist. I mean, Todd, basically everything's fascist, okay?
I know.
I feel like I'm back in 2014.
Of course. Because we have Obama's third term. It's called Joe Biden.
And we have the whole everything is sexist, everything's racist, everything's fascist, you got to point it all out meme. Except it's not coming from Sarkeesian this time. It's coming from Moldbug.
It's coming. I know. Gamergate full circle. So Minoan here, who is Jackson Hinkle? He's a tanky, which is a Soviet Union fanboy on Twitter. He's a part of the mega communism hashtag, which is with Haas Infrared. He does he's a guest host on or guest. He makes guest appearances on. I forgot his
Jimmy
name. The guy,
Dore.
yeah,
Jimmy
Jimmy
Dore.
Dore show, and then he's gonna go on Alex Jones. So
Right. Yeah. Basically, we don't agree with all the politics of Dore or Hinkle or anybody like that, right? But what we're finding interesting and watching very closely is this idea that you've got these far left people who've abandoned the Democratic Party and these far right people who are abandoning the Republican Party both think the system is fundamentally bonkers, but instead of fighting each other in the streets, they're saying, you know what? We both agree we want to crush the system. Let's talk it out. And they're starting to talk it out.
oh, they hate that. Dude, the elite hates that. The divide and conquer strategy is starting to break down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm watching. I'm watching this at a structural level, not due to agreeing with the politics of anybody involved. Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree. I agree. Yeah. That's me as well.
Yeah.
So real quick, Logos, I want you to explain to me while we're still on the air. You said that earlier when I said who was Moldbug pitching this to, and you said to disaffected Brahmins. Who are these disaffected Brahmins? I don't see them.
I explain a little more later. It's
Okay.
these disaffected Brahmins.
Oh, the 90s, right? Yeah.
90s people, right? Yeah, the 90s basically Sargon is what you said. So think Sargon with a tech job, and that's basically
right. Yeah, see, because when the machine was getting like really up and running in 1945, the first men in were men, and they were white men, and that's the world of Mad Men. And all these guys are just butthurt that they're not in the world of Mad Men anymore. And it's like, bro, the machine keeps moving. The revolution never stops.
I don't think they'd want to be in Mad Men anymore. In fact, the world of Mad Men might just be too spooky fascist, Todd. I mean, we got to watch out for that. We all know the true bulwark against fascism was 90s liberalism, which was peak America. All right.
Well, it's the same basic idea, though.
Yep.
And you can't go back.
You can't go back.
You see, you can't go back in at least two senses, right? In one sense, the past is the past, and you can't go back, and that's true for everything. But in one sense, right, the founding fathers to go forward went back, right? They studied ancient modes of government, and then they created a new mode of government for the American Constitution in order to solve present reality problems, which is exactly the way you solve problems. But anything from 1945 on is cartoon simulation land, and so even nothing there is useful in the way that like ancient Greece or Rome would be.
I saw a comment in the chat that said even Sargon moved on from the portrayal we gave him. So basically, Moldbug isn't even like current Sargon, which is still too liberal for my opinion, given your AA stream with him. He's basically like 2014 or 2016 Sargon, but tech.
Yeah. But tech, yeah. Well, and we all, you know what, Logos, I got it. I got the one word pwn for Moldbug. Right? You ready? How many revolutions were ever led by computer programmers?
Well, I mean, there haven't been computer programmers for a while, so the answer is going to be 0.
Yeah, I know. So, but that's what Moldbug wants to do. So,
well, there's a chance. There's a chance. There's always a first time. There's always a first.
There's always a first time.
That's right. He's going to be the first one.
He's going to be the first one.
He's going to write them a very strongly worded letter, and there's going to be a non-violent regime change, transfer of power.
Yes.
And it's going to work.
Yeah. It's like listen here, Brahmins. I've got my ring of Finargle here, and if you're not careful, I'm just going to snap my fingers and make you go away because these lousy Godwin's Law rubes are challenging our sweet gig. Oh man. All right. Is there anything else you want to say, Logos? It's about time to wrap this up.
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, well, all I can say is I was right about Moldbug the whole time. Thanks, everyone.